Nathaniel Gavronsky here, and I'm here to talk to you about the dropping out of Beto O'Rourke of the 2020 campaign for president. Beto O'Rourke, Roberto is his actual first full name, Roberto Francis. He was the member of Congress for the 16th District of Texas. He was first elected in 2012 after being an El Paso city councilman. His family does have actual deep roots in El Paso, dating back to his maternal grandmother, who had a furniture store, his mom, who currently owns it now. His father was actually in the court system. I believe he was a judge there for a while in the El Paso. The 16th district encompasses basically the entire county of El Paso, including the city, which itself is a suburb of a much larger Mexican city. Congressman Beto O'Rourke got into office basically because of the geography and the transportation issues of El Paso. The former rep in the area, who was on transportation committee, didn't seem to do much about the backlog of traffic on the bridges going in and out of Mexico. And that was one of Beto O'Rourke's biggest campaign issues of that election, and he ended up winning with a little bit over 50% of the vote. It was a pretty stunning upset. He got to start basically as an adult with technology, and that kind of shows with his campaigning. He tried to be really into tech. He brought his knowledge of tech from working in Manhattan back to his hometown of El Paso and started his own tech firm called Staten Street. And this tech firm actually did provide technology and internet service for a lot of different websites. So it wasn't like he didn't know what he was doing. He was really kind of on the cutting edge of how to use technology and where technology was going. And so when he used it in his campaign, he was going on something that was kind of more of his core competency before getting into politics. The 16th District of Texas is 374 of 435 as far as median income. Majority of the people there bringing in less than $50,000. Actually, quite a bit less than $50,000. And it's about 93% Hispanic. It is a border town. The El Paso and the Mexican side kind of grew up together from the 1950s with the industrialization. But with NAFTA, a lot of those companies moved to the Mexican side, and it devastated a lot of El Paso. As far as going into the race and running for president of the United States, a couple of things that really sunk Beto O'Rourke, as far as he just really wasn't able to connect with people outside of his basic echo chamber. You know, there are a couple of things that he did have that a lot of people respected. Was he was a term limit guy. He and Iowa former Rep Rod Blum actually had a bill that would limit members of Congress to 10 terms. Beto O'Rourke promised he would only run for 8 terms in the House, but as you know, he did try to go for the Senate. He failed, and then he had this almost arrogant sense about him as far as running for president with that Vanity Fair cover saying, "I was born for this." I can't think anyone being successful with an arrogance that this is just your destiny. It didn't really work for Hillary Clinton. I can't see it working for really anybody else. A couple of things that really plagued Beto O'Rourke outside of his really robotic way of getting to know people was that he had these ideas that really were only viable in an echo chamber. When he kept saying about, "I'm going to take away and confiscate your guns," that makes a great soundbite if you're only talking to a room full of Democrats and only a certain base within the Democratic Party. Not even everyone in the Democratic Party supports gun confiscation. And you saw that with other people running for president calling him out. Like, you're from Texas. No one from Texas is going to be able to run for office in Texas and promoting the confiscation of guns. I mean, this state was born out of confrontation, where being able to defend one's rights and being able to be armed was what allowed people to even begin to start this state as its own republic, the Lone Star Republic, where the single star comes from on the flag. So, I mean, his positions really just were not such that he could win nationally. And with a lot of Democrats nationally that aren't so repulsive on guns. His support just really wasn't going anywhere, especially in Iowa and New Hampshire, where a majority of Democrats do own a lot of weapons. They do a lot of hunting. They do a lot of sport shooting. It's not necessarily hunting for a lot of people who are gun enthusiasts. Some of it is the history of the firearm through military conflict. Some of it is target shooting. There's a lot of discipline. There is some athleticism in training and breathing and being a good shot. So for a lot of Democrats in Iowa and New Hampshire, and even in the Carolinas, the gun confiscation was a non-starter, and he kept pushing for that, and it just kept dropping in the polls. One thing I noticed from Beto O'Rourke is that when he would go to an event, before he was even done speaking, a lot of people would leave. They would just walk out. I don't see this very often. I have seen it in the past. But the amount of people who would leave the event before it was completed was actually pretty incredible. The selfie line was actually quite short. It was just kind of like a mob. It was only maybe 60 people out of rooms that were at one point full of 200-300. And as this campaign kept going, he kept trying to rely on his former core competency, which was tech and innovation and that, and it just didn't really materialize to him. Basically because other people were able to beat him at his own game. AOC had set the new standard for how to interact with people on social media, and Elizabeth Warren has shown how not to do it, and he basically just fit right in the middle. So his strengths were no longer the best of the field. They weren't the worst, but his plans also weren't able to overcompensate for his other weaknesses, and it just kind of snowballed. His fire from the senatorial campaign never materialized as soon as Pete Buttigieg got in. And a lot of people who said I was a big Beto guy left quite early in the process, going over to Pete Buttigieg and going over to Tim Ryan and even going into some other people like Michael Bennet and to Senator Bullock. So it's just going to be something that we're going to have to consider when you're looking at these candidates, is that really what is their viability and is their message catching on? And regardless of the gaffes that the candidates have, regardless of some of the odd things they say, is the message itself really resonating with people? And you can clearly see that with Beto O'Rourke. His message wasn't getting on with people. You notice the people who are promoting gun confiscation, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Beto O'Rourke, those three just plummeted. They were actually doing quite well before the whole gun confiscation speeches really started coming out in force. And I think we need to address that in the United States, gun confiscation is not a winner. And even the assault weapons ban in the 90s didn't have any effect. There were still just as many gun fatalities, just different types of weapons, and those weapons weren't being outlawed. And you're not going to be able to outlaw all guns in the United States. The history of the country is so fundamental, based around gun ownership, that you're never going to be able to propose this and come out on top, especially if you come from Texas. So basically, what's I'm breaking it down to is his message wasn't viable. He couldn't get any funding even from the Democrats because gun confiscation really is not a winner. And I hope some of these other candidates learn that really quickly, because I do believe some of them actually do have some good things they could bring to the table to make the other candidates kind of discuss. And if they concentrate on gun confiscation, they're never going to get a chance to bring up these issues. His crowd management was horrible. His staff couldn't keep people engaged very long. And I think if you start seeing that happen, that your crowd is dwindling while you're speaking, that you need to change up your message. And he never did that. His staff was actually quite friendly. His staff is very engaging. And that's actually a big plus. But your staffing can only go so far. If your staff is good, but you're not able as a candidate to make any headway, your staff is not going to be able to do anything for you. And meanwhile, and at the same time, some other candidates that are actually quite good, their staff is so really non-friendly is the word I'm going to use, that it's diminishing those candidates' ability to be effective. And I'm hoping that for those of you that are watching these videos, and some of you that I do know, I have gotten some feedback from some of the candidates, and this is some things that you should be addressing, is that your message needs to ensure that people aren't walking out on you, that your crowd size isn't dwindling so fast, and that if your staff is actually really offsetting and doesn't let people like get close to you, you're probably not going to do very well, because in Iowa and New Hampshire, it's a personal relationship with the candidates that depict who's going to, people who are going to caucus for, and because it's a different game out here, and it's not going to change. I'm sorry to some of the people who want Iowa out of the #1 spot. The parties have basically said that's not going to happen. The Democrats keep kind of quivering on this, but when it comes down to it, the state of Iowa has such an impact and such a diverse body as far as economics, social economic, education, backgrounds, and as far as urban, rural, manufacturing, service industry. Iowa really does have all of that stuff, and that's how people are voting more so than what color their skin is. And they need to start concentrating on that aspect of people's individuality, is their economic picture and their ability to move upward or be pushed downward economically by policy. That has a huge impact on people of color more than anything else, and people should concentrate on those factors, things that are bringing people up and forcing and keeping people down. That is the message that people should be working on, because that will have the hugest positive or possibly negative impact on people of color or any type of group of people, and that's what they need to address. Along with this would also have a huge impact on criminal justice reform. If people felt like they were able to make a living legitimately, a lot of crimes of necessity would no longer be necessities, and people would give the viable lifestyle a chance. So Beto will work. You couldn't cut it. Your message just really wasn't able to get even a lot of Democrats to follow with you. You had some arrogance as far as your destiny to be president. I actually encourage you to go back to El Paso. I encourage you to stay involved in local politics. I actually would encourage you to help work with Texas, the state of Texas, on infrastructure and possibly helping with some of the immigrants there. I mean, Beto worked. He wasn't like a rubber stamp guy when he was in Congress. He went against the Obama administration on a lot of different things. You know, being a rubber stamp on all Democratic priorities and everything in the platform isn't necessarily a winning case. And what made him so popular is that he did actually stand alone on some instances. So I hope he takes some of that background and goes back to Texas and maybe run for office later on. But for right now, I think he really needs to work on making Texas a more efficient state in the areas where they do have some inefficiencies. I think he could do a lot of work with immigration on a local level, and I wish him well. There will be other videos coming up. There are people that will be dropping out soon, and more people that are coming in that are really not going to go anywhere. So the Democratic primary is getting more and more exciting. We're less than 100 days away from the Iowa caucuses, and a lot of people have no idea what they're doing. So this should be a really exciting year. I'm looking forward to it being kind of a mix of 1976. I can see a little bit of 2004 and 2016 taking place here in the Iowa caucuses on the Democratic side. So I will keep these up. Let me know what you think. And until next time, have a wonderful evening.